Are you tired of your players hacking and slashing their way through your well-thought-out masterpiece of a campaign?
I'm Max.
And I'm Ben.
And this is D&D Ideas.
Sometimes we talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
Sometimes we talk about Dungeons and Dragons and life.
Either way, it's always about ideas.
If you're in the mood for something a little different than the D&D videos you're used to, welcome.
Today's D&D Ideas is about snapping your players out of those murder-hoboing habits.
All you sweet, sweet storytellers out there, this one's for you, DMs.
We at PeakD&D are privileged to have a fantastic DM.
Nick rocks. Were it not for him, yeah.
Nick is so good at what he does, we get more than a few comments about it.
Which says a lot, because as of filming this, a few is about all the comments we get.
Level 2. This week, we're giving the people, or at least one person, what they want.
Negative Space asked about non-combat encounters to engage his players.
So we asked Nick, and here is the resulting video.
Engaging non-combat encounters are a family affair.
What Max means is that having fun with non-combat encounters isn't solely on the DM.
They certainly have a role to play, make no mistake, but so too do the players.
It's the DM's job to come up with the scenarios.
It's the player's job to come with the buy-in and focus.
As a small group, we're exceptionally fortunate at PeakD&D. Our size keeps the game moving, which keeps our attention.
And it's not like the cameras hurt either.
Yeah, and paying attention to the game is key. You need to have your players' attention in order to create an engaging non-combat encounter.
Which means it's on you DMs to make your scenarios interesting and, most importantly, fun.
But before going there, we need to zoom out a bit.
We are animals.
Oh, okay, wow, we zoomed out a whole lot.
Hey man, you know how I like to get.
Yes, no, please carry on, my philosophical friend.
Humans are animals. Players are human. Which means players can be trained.
As a DM, do you incentivize the behaviors you want to see in your players?
Do you reward non-combat solutions just as much, or better yet, more than the sword?
Take a look in the mirror and ask yourself these questions.
Because having a trial or a negotiation boss fight is something you build to.
It's a progression that starts with you priming your players.
Your players may need to follow some breadcrumbs first.
It takes a trail to get to the trial.
Yes, exactly.
See, ideally, you start your players down the path of non-combat awesomeness from the very beginning.
The earlier the better, kind of like training a puppy.
Then, with the proper repetition and rewards, your most murdery of murder hobos will eventually catch on.
Here are a few breadcrumbs you can use to lead your players down the non-combat path.
Starting with the most heavy-handed. Straight up, have your quest giver explicitly state it.
Tell your players they'll get an extra shiny for doing the thing without killing.
Now, not the most elegant solution, to be sure, more an entire loaf than a breadcrumb, but it should serve to activate that non-murder part of your player's brains.
A more subtle version of this can be done with information.
Information is ammunition.
Hot take, loot is lame. Story rewards, much cooler.
Let's say your party of murder hobos is charged with ridding the area of local bandits.
Now, killing is a form of ridding.
Technically correct. If you know your players are the kind to stab first and ask questions never, give one of the bandits a letter and plant it on them.
Dear so-and-so, my infiltration of this bandit cell is going swimmingly. I've won their confidence and I'm on the cusp of a major breakthrough.
Make sure that so-and-so is someone more powerful than your players who they'll likely meet later.
Bonus points if you add a line at the end of this letter that just tugs at your player's heartstrings.
Tell little Jimmy and Delilah that I'll be home before the next winter's feast day.
Here, you've done two things. First, if you're plucky, you'll have hit your players in the feels, and second, you've put them at an informational disadvantage.
By alluding to a group the spy was working for, you've shown your players that the world is much larger than they thought.
To further reinforce this message of talky-talky over stabby-stabby, have your players cross paths with said organization.
If the spy was working for the church, have your players need the church's help with something.
Then, have the person in charge be be so-and-so from the letter, and have them demand that your players prove their worth with a really hard quest.
Because they accidentally ended up killing the guy before. Finally, at the end of the quest-giving conversation, mention that, oh, if only our secret agent hadn't been caught and killed by some unknown people, this all would be avoided.
Again, heavy-handed, but sometimes that's what it takes, especially if your group is all-day, everyday murder.
As a recovering murder hobo, I can attest this is a difficult task. But another way that you can prime your group to begin thinking this way involves the big bads. Here's another breadcrumb that you can use.
Let's say your intrepid heroes just finished a dungeon, that they've used all their spell slots and all the resources and are in really dire need of a long rest.
Instead of giving it to them, have the big bad bamf in and take something in the dungeon that they might need.
Maybe it's treasure, maybe it's a person they've rescued, or a piece of the plot.
Whatever it is, make sure the party is in no way capable of fighting or living through an actual combat encounter.
But do not make the party feel cornered, because that will backfire.
Absolutely. Instead, let the big bad monologue for a bit. Mention how they just came for the whatever it is in the dungeon, display an awesome amount of power that your players will realize is completely out of their league, and then have them bamf away.
Have the dragon show up and just crash into buildings, toppling them everywhere, and melt something with its breath weapon.
Have a wizard or beholder teleport in, disintegrate a statue right next to one of the players, laugh at them, take whatever they want, and then they leave.
Try crumbs like these, and chances are your players will either run away with their tails between their legs or stay and talk.
This sets the precedent that adversaries can be talked to, even reasoned with.
One thing that all of these crumbs we've mentioned so far do is introduce a new player on the board.
The organization with the bandit spy, another adversary at the end of the dungeon. These are other players in your world.
If your players know that there are other players in the world besides them, that it's far less black and white than they think, then maybe the next time they're faced with a challenge, they'll seek help.
If that happens, you've got yourself a super sweet opportunity for a negotiation boss fight.
Check out our video on those here.
But by far, the creme de la creme of non-combat encounters is a trial.
It can be with an elf god, or a city guard, or some coatls.
Trials are the epitome of non-combat encounters because they mirror combat.
There are two sides. There's a clear winner and loser. One side attacks, the other defends.
This type of encounter is especially fun for your scholars.
Scholars are your players that are really into the lore of your world and the story itself.
A trial is a good way to reward any of your players and engage all those scholars.
Trials will also serve to humanize the bad guys.
Remember, the most compelling villains don't actually consider themselves villains. A trial gives you the opportunity to show it.
In our game, Beyond the Feywild, we had to prove to the elf god of justice that what the Nazi elves were doing wasn't justice, it was revenge.
And in so doing, she presented their side of things, their thinking, which was pretty cool.
Players think they're the heroes and that they are unquestionably right.
And challenging their beliefs can make for a fun and informative session.
And remember, after each successful step your players take down the non-combat path, you need to reward them.
Perhaps they make a new ally that they can call on.
Maybe the person they didn't kill gives them a quest for that thing they've been bugging you about the whole game, or it ties into a character backstory.
Or when doling out experience, you give them a bonus, plus this non-trivial amount of experience for not slaughtering the orc village and talking to the shaman.
Whatever you decide, this part is crucial, because behavior change, which is essentially what we've been talking about this whole time, needs two things: rewards and feedback.
Which also means if and when your players resort to violence in an encounter where violence wasn't the best choice, make sure they know that.
We, however, at PeakD&D do not advocate punishing your players.
No. But a good emotional gut punch, like letting the players know they accidentally murdered a fellow good guy who might have been able to help them and possibly created a few orphans in the process, can oftentimes do the trick.
Or have their violent choice have consequences that they'll not only have to own up to and face, but that genuinely make their path through the game harder.
And if you've made it this far, which thank you, and you're still not convinced that non-combat encounters are something your game needs, think about this.
Not having non-combat encounters in your game essentially tells your puppies charisma is the dump stat and to never waste a single proficiency in any of its skills.
Hey, thanks for wait, did you just call players puppies?
Oh, I did, and that's the next D&D ideas.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video, everybody.
We appreciate it.
Just like we'd appreciate a comment down below or a thumbs up if you like this video.
If there is a D&D idea you'd like us to talk about, cast sending. Negative Space did.
Our email address is always down there in the description.
If you like what we do here, subscribe. Tell a friend.
To everyone who does and has, thank you. You are how we level up.
Dispel the glyphs of warding around your notification bell so you don't miss your turn.
PeakD&D, Dungeons & Dragons videos, Saturdays, and some other days too.
Until next time, keep on climbing until you reach your peak.